The overhead lights in the small glass-walled review room buzzed faintly as Desmond set a folder on the table between us and turned it to face me. Inside was a printed screenshot from a design blog, a leaked photo of the still unfinished lobby at Ashford House, the boutique hotel our studio had spent 14 months restoring. He said the firm had traced the upload to my login credentials, and that effective immediately, my contract was terminated. His junior partner, Priya, folded her arms and said she'd always suspected I cared more about my own name than the client's timeline. They watched me closely, clearly braced for a denial, maybe tears, maybe a scene. What they got instead was silence, and then something close to relief, because I hadn't slept properly in 11 months, and some tired, honest part of me had been waiting for a door to open, even one that slammed. I slid my building badge across the table, thanked them for the opportunity, and walked out past the drafting tables I'd spent years arranging myself. I didn't argue that I hadn't leaked anything, because I already knew arguing wouldn't matter to people who'd decided the story before I sat down. What I didn't say out loud was that I still had the only complete set of structural notes on the hotel's custom staircase balustrade, the one I'd flagged 8 months earlier as a compliance risk, the one Desmond had overruled to save $40,000 in fabrication costs. To explain how I ended up in that room, you have to go back 3 years to when Desmond Cole hired me straight out of a boutique studio in Chicago to help build his young firm into something with real reputation. He called me his creative backbone in front of clients, and for a while I believed the phrase meant something. I designed nearly every signature interior the firm became known for. The marble reading lounge that got picked up by 3 shelter magazines, the sunken courtyard bar that investors used in every pitch deck. I trained 2 junior designers who left within a year for better titles elsewhere, and I was never replaced, just quietly absorbed into whoever remained. By the time the Ashford House project landed, I was essentially running design and construction liaison alone, answering calls from contractors at midnight, because I was the only one who understood how the historic building's original wiring interacted with the new steel supports we were threading through it. Somewhere in the middle of that grind, I met Elena Voss at a regional design conference, where I'd been invited to speak about adaptive reuse in landmark buildings. She ran a much smaller, much better funded studio 2 states over, and she asked pointed, generous questions after my talk instead of vague compliments. Over the following months, she'd occasionally send me interesting problems to think through. Nothing that competed with my day job, just conversations between people who respected each other's judgment. I never once considered it disloyalty. I certainly never leaked anything to a blog. What actually happened, I'd learn later, was smaller and pettier than anyone imagined. A junior designer named Nolan, eager to be handed the Ashford House unveiling as his own breakout moment, had photographed the unfinished lobby from my saved project files and sent it to the blog under an anonymous tip, hoping the resulting chaos would knock me out of contention for the launch credit. He hadn't expected Desmond to trace the metadata back to my account, since I was the one who'd built the shared folder structure everyone used. Nolan let the assumption stand. Nobody asked him a single question. The day after my termination, Elena called, not to gloat, but to ask gently whether I'd finally consider joining her studio as creative director, an offer she'd floated twice before, and I'd twice declined out of some stubborn loyalty to a firm that had never once returned it. This time I said yes before she finished the sentence. I started that Monday. Her team of 6 greeted me like they'd been waiting for me specifically, pulling up half-finished renderings and asking what I thought before I'd even found the coffee machine. It felt disorienting, honestly, to be asked instead of assumed upon. Back at my old firm, the countdown I'd quietly known was coming started almost immediately. Ashford House was 5 days from its grand opening gala, a launch the property's owner, a hotelier named Julian Ashford, had already invited 200 guests and a dozen press outlets to attend. On Tuesday, the city's final safety inspection flagged the custom staircase balustrade. The exact detail Desmond had cheapened against my written objection, for failing to meet code load requirements. There were no original engineering files left in the office. I'd kept my working notes on a personal drive, a habit born from watching two previous employers lose entire project histories to server failures. Without those notes, the fabricator couldn't safely retrofit the railing in time, and without the railing, the fire marshal wouldn't sign off on public occupancy. Desmond called Wednesday morning, his voice unnervingly calm at first, asking if I might look over a few files as a favor. By Wednesday evening, after Julian Ashford threatened to pull his remaining investment and go public about the delay, Desmond called again, no longer calm, offering me a number large enough that a year earlier it would have silenced every doubt I'd ever had about staying. He apologized, sort of, in the careful language of someone more worried about liability than regret. While I sat with his offer, a mutual contact from the old office, someone who'd never much liked Nolan, forwarded me a screenshot of him bragging in a private chat about how the leak thing worked out fine, dated the night before my firing. It reached Julian Ashford's team roughly the same hour, since Nolan had made the mistake of bragging to someone who also freelanced for Ashford's PR firm. I never took Desmond's money. I told him, honestly, that the balustrade fix wasn't complicated, and that Marcus, the metal fabricator we'd used throughout the project, still had the original load specifications from our very first site survey, because I'd sent them to his shop directly rather than trusting a shared server. I told Desmond to call Marcus himself. Then I told Julian Ashford, when he reached me separately, exactly what had actually happened with the leak, and let him decide what to do with that information. Ashford House opened 4 days late, instead of on schedule, quieter and smaller than planned, with Julian issuing a brief statement about unexpected engineering revisions. Nolan was gone within the month. Desmond never publicly apologized to me, and I stopped waiting for one. What I did get, without asking, was Julian mentioning my name approvingly to 2 other developers at the delayed opening, which is how Voss Interiors landed its largest commission yet before the year was out. I didn't need my old firm to collapse to feel like the ledger was even. I didn't need Desmond begging or a wire transfer with my name on it. What I needed, it turned out, was simply to stop being the invisible structure holding up someone else's credit and to work somewhere my name was said out loud for the right reasons. That's the quieter kind of vindication nobody warns you about. Not watching someone fall, but finally standing somewhere solid enough that you never think about them at all.